Hello and welcome to Brass Tacks Talking Cybersecurity, brought to you by Fortinet. I'm your host, Joe Robertson, and cybersecurity is exactly what this show is about, but we don't talk technology, at least not very much. We talk about the business implications of cybersecurity for decision makers, executives, and board members. In fact, for anyone whose role could be impacted by cyber attacks, which really, when you get down to it nowadays, means just about everyone. As for me, I'm an executive consultant helping top managers navigate the intersection between business needs and security requirements. Now, we call the program Brass Tacks because the expression getting down to brass tacks means getting to the core of a subject, the important points. So, let's get down to brass tacks. Today's guest is Jorges Fernandez, CISO and Data Protection Officer at CMVM, which is the Portuguese Securities Market Commission. Jorge, welcome to Brass Tacks. Let's talk cybersecurity.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, first off, can you tell us what CMVM is? I know it's some big, long Portuguese phrase that I can't pronounce, but it's something more than that.
Yes, CMVM stands for Comissão do Mercado de Valores Mobiliários, which is the capital market supervisor in Portugal. And I work there as CISO and DPO. But today I'm here at a personal level, not representing CMVM, and the opinions that I'm going to express are my own and not official doctrine.
Okay, well, that's certainly fair enough. Not only are you at CMVM, but you actually represent Portugal in some ways at a number of European-level regulatory bodies that are creating regulations such as DORA, the Digital Operations Resilience Act, and also there's other acts that are very important in the cybersecurity area. You have a lot of hats to wear, okay? CISO, Data Protection Officer, Regulator. Okay? How does one have a career that moves in that direction?
Well, in my case, I started as a system and network administrator, and I was performing some security functions related to those areas. Gradually, I started to become more specialized in security as security became more a separate discipline in the early 2000s, and I got into more managerial roles until I became CMVM's first CISO back in 2008. I moved to France, to the European Securities and Markets Authorities in Paris in 2014, and I worked there for 3 years as as a person responsible for cybersecurity. So basically, the CISO, everything but the title. Then in 2017, I moved to the Council of Europe Development Bank as their CISO. I stayed there until 2021, at the time when I returned to Portugal, to CMVM, as CISO and DPO. And CMVM participate in the work of many steering committees and working groups at ESMA. The president of CMVM is one of the members of the board of supervisors, and national competent authorities are supposed to send people to participate in those working groups.
And you're one of the representatives.
Cybersecurity, operational resilience, and digital finance. They asked me to participate in those groups and bring some of my expertise and some of my experience to those groups and to discuss issues that relate to supervision in general and to the production of regulatory acts that complement the legislation that has already been approved.
Okay, with your background, I was looking forward to having a conversation about those two aspects of what you do, the role of the CISO and the role of the regulator. Let's start with the CISO. From your point of view, how should a CISO in any organization be relating to his job, his team, and the rest of the company?
Well, when you become a CISO, you become a manager, if not before. At the time you become a CISO, you are supposed to be a manager. So you should be managing a team that is going to do operational stuff not necessarily doing the operational stuff yourself. So as CISO, you have several things to do, several roles. One of them is to try to reduce any problems or obstacles that will occur and prevent your team from doing their work. And for the rest of the organization, the CISO should be a business enabler, should be a partner, should be someone that your peers trust to try to help them solve their problems. CISO should be the person responsible for making sure that the rest of the company operates in a secure way.
So is the CISO a super techie or a super non-techie?
A CISO should ideally have some technical background that helps them understand the problems, but not in a way that you are supposed to be issuing command line commands. It's not for you anymore. That time has passed. You are supposed to think more strategic level. You have to understand the business, to understand the mission of your company. You have to understand what each department does, how they operate, and try to help them do their job in the most secure way possible. So when they ask for something, you shouldn't be the one to say no. You should be the one to say yes, but, or let me see how I can help you do that, instead of say no, you cannot do that. Because if you are on the head of the department of no, what you are promoting is shadow IT and people trying to find alternatives, and you are perceived as part of the problem and not part of the solution. In the same mindset, you should not be perceived as someone that will point fingers or try to punish or rate to people saying that they didn't do their job. People should trust you and not be afraid of coming to you and saying, listen, I may have clicked in an email that I wasn't supposed to. Help me try to see what happened and try to minimize the impact. And that is what it's all about, is minimizing the impact of a cybersecurity event. You cannot expect a company not to be attacked, not to be hacked. It's like a disease. You will eventually get ill. The idea is for a small infection not to propagate and affect the whole body. So a cybersecurity event should be restricted and not expand and not affect the company. And for regulations, it's the same. It's about either a nation with the NIS2 or an industry, the financial sector with DORA. The idea is to prevent incidents from spreading and affecting the whole sector.
Okay, so we're starting to get into that second area of regulations that I'm interested in us covering. Let me circle back, though, on the CISO role for just a moment. From the point of view of the board of directors, of the executives, the executive committee of an organization, that CISO should be reporting where? To the board, to IT, or does it really vary by company?
I've seen many different approaches. The most traditional one is for the CISO to be stuck in the IT department, but I'm against that approach, because at the end of the day, the head of IT or the CIO will have to have a conflict of interest between maintaining operations and addressing cybersecurity. The fact that I'm also a DPO gave me direct access to the top management, to the president, and that helps me discuss the security issues without my thoughts being filtered by someone else. But I would say that answering directly to any board member, so either CFO, CEO, even sometimes CRO, risk, there are optimal approaches. Stocking cybersecurity inside a unit that has a middle-level manager is not a good approach. Yeah. However, there are some roles that should be handled by IT, and sometimes there's a part of network administration that addresses security issues.
Kind of a split.
You have to share responsibilities. There are some security operational roles that are done by the IT team, but when you are thinking in terms of a security operations center, checking your CM and all that, that should be done by a separate team with a separate path to top management.
Okay. Let's move over to the regulation side. That part of your background I find very interesting. Now, a lot of times we talk or we hear people talk about faceless bureaucrats from Brussels who are regulating. You know, well, you're not from Brussels. You seem pretty normal. But from your point of view, what is the role of regulation? It's not about hindering business.
No. It's maintaining a leveled playing field for everyone and making sure that monopolies do not affect consumers at the end, which is...
That's how regulation started.
Yeah. So in the financial sector, regulations, in general, tend to protect the end user or the investor. One of the missions of CMVM is precisely to protect the investor. And the way you protect is to promote free competition, but at the same time to impose a certain set of rules that forces companies to, in the case of SWIFT or DORA, to address cybersecurity risks and lower them. Because it's tempting for a company to consider just the profit part and not and think that the odds of a cybersecurity event happening to me are low, so I don't care. I'll address them. I prefer to pay the fine instead of buying the security controls or implementing the security controls that I need. And the role of regulations is precise to say that's not a good approach. There's a minimum that you have to address. And by the way, in NIS2 and DORA, the decisions that relate to your cybersecurity stance and how you protect your organization should be based on risk management. And when a regulator comes to check what you've done, you'll have to show the risk management exercise that will justify the decisions of either to invest or not invest in specific controls and implement specific things. And by doing that, you are making sure that cybersecurity events that may happen in one organization do not spread like wildfire and affect the whole industry and affect how society in general operates. I mean, NIS2, it's more for critical infrastructures. You are protecting electricity, water, waste management, food supply. DORA is specific for the financial sector, but the idea is that you do not have a WannaCry type event that will spread across the financial sector, and one day you wake up and all the banks are closed or you cannot do any transaction, and that because that would cause panic, that would cause a bank run.
Not a good thing for any country, any economy.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the idea then of regulation is to ensure that everyone does at least a minimum of due diligence so that contagions don't spread.
Yes.
That we contain them as much as possible.
And it's important to notice, in particular for DORA, that DORA has embedded in the text a principle of proportionality. So it's like a 50 people stockbroker is not treated the same way as a large multinational bank or at a trading venue.
So there's a recognition that a smaller organization can't do the same things.
Exactly. Or at least it will have to implement those controls at a slower pace. So there are criteria that determine if a company is considered to be too small. They'll have a simplified risk management process to implement instead of a more detailed one. And that is taken into consideration by regulators when they are checking whether the things were made or not.
Well, that brings up an interesting point, because I know that recently in the United States, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the CISA, has come up with what they call the Secure by Design pledge. And that's a way of saying it shouldn't just be the companies and the end users that are responsible for protecting. The cybersecurity vendors need to have a lot more of the burden of protection on them. And so I think as of now, almost 70 different cybersecurity and other IT vendors have signed this pledge for transparency. So transparency of when they've got vulnerabilities, they are publicized, that they are able to provide a very quick remediation. There's other aspects of it. As a regulator yourself, what's your view of this secure by design concept? Even though it's not European for the moment, it's American, but it's the kind of thing that's going to be global.
I mean, companies in Europe buy software made in the States or designed by American companies, or hardware, it's the same. So it's important, and it will definitely affect Europe and European companies. That initiative is important because it will reduce the burden of making sure that the software that you buy or the hardware, I'm thinking of digital devices, there's a minimum security that should be provided by the vendor and should not be transferred. The burden of making sure that the software is secure or the device is secure should not be transferred to the company that buys it. There's an expectation that the software that I buy does not have embedded default passwords, promoting multi-factor authentication to make sure that even if someone cracks my password, they will not be able to access the system because the system will ask for a second authentication factor. Making sure that vulnerabilities are addressed and the life cycle of the software that is maintained is longer, so that you are not forced to evolve and upgrade your systems just to make sure that you receive the security updates. Because sometimes you cannot do it. If you have a computer connected to an hospital device, most of the times you cannot upgrade it immediately because you'll risk losing support.
Same thing with industrial control systems in some cases.
So it's important for those products that were bought several years ago to still receive security updates. I mean, not new features for sure, but there's a responsibility of the vendors to maintain the security of those products for as long as possible, because it's the idea that you just need to upgrade to a newer system. It's not feasible. There are lots of legacy systems out there. There are many companies that would like to upgrade their systems, but they can't. And by not receiving software upgrades, they put themselves into risk. So moving this approach and forcing vendors to be more responsible towards vulnerability management is definitely a bonus for everyone, and it will lower the level of risk that the company exposes to when they buy or implement a product. I buy a piece of software for a specific need. I'm exposing myself to the risk of the vulnerabilities that product may have. So by making sure that the vendor is responsible for providing me fixes for those vulnerabilities, it's a big plus.
So it's a very positive aspect. Well, George, I really want to thank you for the time that you've spent with us here on Brass Tacks. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
My pleasure, Joe.
And that's it for today's Brass Tacks with Jorges Fernandez, CISO and Data Protection Officer at CMVM. I hope you found it interesting and useful. Please join us again for another episode of Brass Tacks Talking Cybersecurity, brought to you by Fortinet. This series is available both as an audio and a video podcast. You will find it on your regular podcast app or YouTube, as well as on Fortinet TV.